hear me there okay? That's okay? Okay. Right. Yeah, this is published under the name The Set Question by Ashley Lister. This is Kiss and Makeup. According to Descartes, Dracula began slowly. I think, therefore I am. However, if I think I'm a vampire, and we accept that vampires don't exist, does this mean that I don't exist? Bob and Linda exchanged a glance. What's wrong with him tonight? Asked Bob. Linda rolled her eyes and shook her head. She cut a striking figure, striding by his side. She was tall and raven-haired and dressed in a clinging suit comprised of black leather jeans with a matching jacket. Her skin was as white as alabaster, except for the full, ripe lips that hid her elongated canines. Bob noticed that Linda's ample chest rose and fell swiftly, as it always did after she'd fed. Her long scarlet nails glinted with slivers of silver moonlight as her fingers twitched impatiently by her hips. It's Dracula's dark gift, Linda explained. Whoever he's been feeding from, he temporarily absorbs some aspect of their personality. When he feeds from drunks, he acts drunk. When he feeds from stoners, he gets high. She tossed an impatient glance in Dracula's direction and added, "This is what he gets like after feeding on philosophy students. He'll spend the night being metaphysical and talking incomprehensible bullshit." Bob nodded and accepted this. He had been feeling a little lightheaded himself since feeding, and he suspected it was because his victim had been a student. It had been his idea to visit the student union bar. Admittedly, the necks weren't particularly clean, and most of the victims contained more chemicals than an overstocked pharmacy, but the feeding had been easy, quick, and ultimately satisfying. Now, with his bloodlust sated, Bob found his thoughts were moving to different yet more familiar appetites. Staring hungrily at Linda, he licked his lips and graced her with an appreciative smile. "You've been with Dracula for a while." "We've been partners for a couple of centuries," Linda allowed, "although there are times when it feels longer. Sometimes I think we're just staying together so that we can piss each other off and then kiss and make up." Bob nodded as though he understood. He didn't understand, but he wanted Linda to consider him a good listener, so the pretense was essential. He'd read somewhere that women appreciated men who were good listeners, and earning Linda's approval was an all-consuming goal that seemed more important than ever now he had fed. "Dracula doesn't strike me as the most attentive partner," Bob ventured. Linda shot a scornful glare in Dracula's direction. The legendary vampire was studying the back of his hand with an expression of happy amazement on his face. His violet eyes were wide and incredulous, and his lips silently formed the word, "Wow." "He's been doing this sort of thing for a long time," Linda sighed. She gestured back towards the cemetery gates, and Bob got the idea she was indicating the carnage that they'd left behind at the student union bar. Linda's voice was tinged with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "There are times when Dracula forgets that feeding can fuel urges in some of us younger vampires." "Urges?" Linda glanced at him. Her eyes were as violent and expressive as Dracula's, and they glistened with encouragement. "Strong urges," she murmured. The trio continued walking through the cemetery. It was a convenient shortcut back to the house that they were using as a temporary refuge for their mini-coven. The route was also an apposite reminder of the death that they'd caused during their feeding frenzy at the SU bar. While Dracula paused and marvelled over the awesome lichen moss he had found on one ancient headstone, Bob and Linda continued to walk briskly through the moonlit necropolis. Bob noticed that Dracula was falling behind, but he kept the observation to himself as he and Linda crunched their way down the gravel path. "So, feeding fuels strong urges in you?" he prompted. "Feeding fuels strong urges in all us young vampires," Linda assured him. Her voice had fallen to a husky drawl. "All that biting, feeding and intimacy. touching strange human flesh, penetrating bare skin, tasting blood. She shivered, her eyes shone. It's like an appetizer before a meal, she explained, or like foreplay. Bob paused before responding, not sure he could speak without nervousness trembling in his voice. He regarded Linda with solemn appreciation and said, "What's the point of an appetizer if there's no main course to follow?" "Exactly." "And what's the point of foreplay if there's no—" "Exactly," she said again. With a small giggle, Linda snatched at his hand and dragged him away from the cemetery path. The action was so swift that Bob was briefly unsure what was happening. Their feet gave a final scrunch on the gravel before Bob found Linda had dragged him onto a patch of moist grass. She pulled him downward to the discreet shelter behind a tall tombstone. Lying on the grass, she was positioned beneath him with her legs spread wide apart so that he could comfortably kneel between them. His body was pressed firmly against hers. The position was so intimate that he could feel himself immediately growing hard. His erection throbbed with the sudden prospect of pleasure. Since becoming a vampire, his senses seemed more highly attuned. He was aware of the faraway sound of Dracula stumbling along the gravel path, the distant chirrup of nocturnal insects and birds calling to each other in the night, and the closer scent of Linda's sexual hunger. For an instant, he could picture her thoughts, an ability he had come to think of as his own dark gift. In Linda's mind, he could see they were both naked, their pallid bodies entwined beneath moonlight on the gravel-yard grass, and his erection was plunging slowly and solidly into the yielding split of her sex. It was a powerful image, and he shut it from his thoughts before Linda could realise that he'd been reading her mind. "You do have strong urges, don't you?" he muttered. "I think we both have strong urges." She was tugging at the belt that fastened his jeans. On any other woman, her long fingernails would have made the task awkward, cumbersome. Linda slipped the belt open with practiced ease and then began to work on the buttons of his jeans, popping them apart with casual dexterity. "I think we both have the same strong urges," Linda assured him, "and I think we both know how to sate them." He placed his hand on her wrist, momentarily stopping her from releasing the last of his buttons. "Are you sure this is wise?" Bob asked softly. "Don't you want to do this?" He laughed, keeping the sound muted for fear of alerting Dracula to the whereabouts of their hiding place. "I didn't mean that. You know I want to do this as much as you do, but..." He glanced over his shoulder and peered past the shelter of the gravestone. Dracula continued to stumble down the gravel path. He was now walking with his head held back as he stared at the stars in the sky above. The ancient vampire's face was a mask of childish wonderment. Slowly, he murmured the words, "That is so fucking awesome." "I mean," Bob told Linda, "what about him? Won't you be pissed off if he catches us together?" "Damn right you'd be pissed off," Linda agreed. "He'd be absolutely livid." In a conspirational whisper that tickled against his earlobe, she added, "So we best make sure he doesn't catch us." Moving her face from Bob's ear, she placed a kiss against his mouth and slid her tongue between his lips. Bob made no attempt to resist. He moved his hand from Linda's wrist and allowed her to kiss him with ferocious hunger, while her fingers slipped easily into his jeans. Her hands were icy cold, partly from the night's chill and mainly because Linda was all vampire. The cool touch of her fingers against his erection was enough to make him yearn for her with a fresh and furious desire. When her hand encircled his shaft, he had to pull his mouth away from her kiss for fear of the excitement becoming more than he could resist. "You do have some strong urges, don't you?" Linda whispered. "Strong as yours," he countered. Linda's jacket was fastened by a zipper, and he pulled it open in one fluid movement to reveal the bare skin beneath. Shadows and darkness kept her body briefly from his view, but he traced his hands over the exposed flesh, blindly reveling in the sensation of caressing her naked body. Linda moaned. Bob pushed his mouth over Linda's. In an instant, the pair were embroiled in a passionate, sultry kiss. As their lips connected and their tongues wrestled and battled with hungry eagerness, Bob could feel his need for Linda growing more urgent and desperate. His fingertips brushed over the hard thrust of one nipple. A spark of electric excitement crackled from his touch. "Fuck, yes," Linda spat. Encouraged, Bob caught the stiff bead of flesh and teased it firmly between finger and thumb. The effect on Linda was immediate. She writhed wantonly beneath him. Holding her breast still, so Bob could continue to tease her, she tore at his clothes with animal fury. His shirt was shredded and then wrenched away, and his jeans were ripped open and tugged downwards. Equally eager to experience Linda's completely bare body, Bob stripped the jacket from her ultra-white torso. Because they'd shifted position slightly, he was afforded his first glimpse of her naked breasts. The sight of her full bosom made his erection throb with renewed urgency. The tips of her nipples were thick and rigid. Their flushed colour was almost cherry red against her moonlight-pale skin. Unable to resist, Bob lowered his mouth to one breast and sucked hungrily. Linda stiffened, and then her loins rose up to meet him. Her body pulsated against his as though they were already in the throes of a more passionate and penetrative act. As Bob greedily sucked and slurped against her nipple, he could feel the woman beneath him responding eagerly. "Fuck me," Linda grunted. "I want you to fuck me." Her hand returning to his erection, and she gripped it with a force that was almost agonizing. "I want you to fuck me now and fuck me hard," she panted. "Do it, Bob." Bob grinned and began to slowly peel the leather jeans from her hips. If Linda was desperate for him now, he felt sure she would be insane with desire by the time he'd slipped the jeans from her legs. "Quickly," she insisted. Bob whispered his response while planting lazy kisses against her bare thighs. "I'm going as quick as I can." "Linda!" Dracula's plaintive voice echoed from the darkness. He sounded far away, but not so far away that Bob thought they would consider themselves safe. "Hey, Linda!" Dracula called. "Where have you gone, hun? I think I got lost again." "Keep quiet," Linda gasped. Bob hadn't needed the warning. He had no intention of letting Dracula know where they were or what they were doing. He didn't make a sound, but simply continued to ease the leather jeans down Linda's strong, muscular thighs and plant the occasional kiss against her freshly exposed skin. The scent of her sex had already reached his nostrils, the fragrance of animal need. She was wet and ready for him, was so irresistible he could think of nothing except devouring her. He finally pulled the jeans from her legs and lowered his face to Linda's moist split. Like a connoisseur, he marvelled briefly over the beauty of her appearance and then gently inhaled her fragrance. Her natural perfume was intoxicating. His erection throbbed again, and he knew if he simply continued to drink in the scent of her pussy, he could possibly reach his climax from that stimulus alone. When he finally lowered his mouth, stroking his tongue against Linda's moist, febrile lips, an orgasmic rush of bliss bristled through his body. "Fuck," Linda murmured. "That's good." "Yeah," Bob agreed. He stroked his tongue against her lips again, savouring her rich musk as it tormented his senses. "Linda!" Dracula called. "Where the hell are you, Linda? I'm getting pissed now!" To Bob, Dracula's distant cries were as meaningless as the night's chill or the collection of freshly drained corpses that they'd left behind at the SU bar. All that existed for him were Linda's words of encouragement and the sultry sweet flavour of her sex against his tongue. He teased the lips of her labia apart and then trilled the tip of his tongue against her pulsating clitoris. He pushed his tongue between her pussy lips, enjoying the sensation of her inner muscles as they clenched sporadically against him. Her responsiveness was a further joy for him. As Linda trembled beneath him and urged him to continue, Bob couldn't recall a moment when his arousal had felt so powerful or so satisfying. "Oh, come on, Linda," Dracula called. "Don't tell me you've gone off screwing the new kid. I thought you said you were done fooling around after I ripped the viscera out of your last conquest." Bob slowly pulled his head away from Linda's pussy, his lower jaw glistening with a sheen of her arousal. Linda could clearly see he was unsettled because she placed a reassuring hand on his chest and shook her head. In the softest whisper she said, "Don't listen to him. Dracula didn't rip out anyone's viscera. He's just saying that to try and make himself sound scary." Bob didn't want to tell Linda that Dracula had succeeded in making himself sound scary. Such an admission was likely to make him appear undesirable, and he didn't want to do anything that would spoil the chance of sharing his climax with Linda. Accepting her reassurance and spurred on by the fact that she was now guiding his erection towards her open sex, he forced himself to push his length between her thighs. There was an instant of pure bliss. The unvampiric heat of her sex was a furnace around his icy shaft. Her inner muscles gripped his length more tightly than Linda had managed with her strong, powerful hands. As he slid deeper, his length lubricated by a melt of his own saliva and Linda's eager arousal, Bob could feel the climax building in his loins. Linda pressed her mouth close to Bob's ear and said, "Don't let Dracula worry you with all that talk about ripping out a guy's viscera. It's not true." Bob was past caring. Sliding in and out of her moist, velvety warmth, he slowed his rhythm so that it matched Linda's steady and relentless motion. His thoughts were occupied only with the divine sensations around his shaft and the determination to stretch their shared pleasure for as long as possible. Linda shivered beneath him. She dammed a fist into her mouth at one point to stifle a scream of satisfaction. Bob could feel the flood of fresh warm moisture soaking his length as he continued to plough in and out of her sex. When she nibbled lightly on his ear and said, "Fill me with your cum," he finally allowed himself the release that his body craved. His length sputtered and pulsed. A rush of orgasmic relief flooded his body. Beneath him, Linda groaned with soft satisfaction. She continued to ride her pussy against his pulsating length, milking every last drop of the seed from him and shivering as though his release had been as satisfying for her as it had been for him. "Linda!" Dracula exclaimed. Bob stiffened. Cold fingers grabbed his shoulder and then he was torn away from Linda and thrown against a headstone. He caught a brief glimpse of Linda, naked on the grass, her legs spread and a white trickle of his seed dribbling from the spread lips of her sex. And then Dracula was standing over him and fixing him with the most menacing scowl. "I'll rip your viscera out!" Dracula shrieked. Linda was struggling to find her clothes. "Don't worry about his empty threats," she said quickly. "I told you, he never ripped anyone's viscera out. He's never done that to any of the guys I've played with. All Dracula's ever done was make me help him suck every last drop of blood from the body of the guy that I've been fooling with." Dracula turned to glare at her. Bob saw that Dracula's glare became a smile of approval. He was devastated to see Linda return the smile. It's almost like one of those bonding exercises they make couples do in marriage counselling. She was talking to Bob but staring directly at Dracula. "I think it allowed us to redevelop our trust for each other again." Her voice had a dreamy quality. It was like we'd had a chance to kiss and make up, and it was so sexual. "And the guy you were both sucking?" Bob broke in. Linda shrugged as though the matter was of no consequence. "Just another dead vampire. No creature can survive without having some blood coursing through its veins. Vampires are no exception to that rule." Dracula grinned and dragged Bob from the ground. "She's right," he confirmed. "No creature can survive without some blood coursing through its veins." And his grin grew menacing as he added, "And you're about to find out just how true that is." Afterward, back at the temporary house, with Bob's strange remains a rotting memory in the graveyard, Dracula turned to Linda and smiled. His lips remained crimson, moist and sultry. "You're going to think I'm depraved," he started, "but ever since we drained Bob, I've been getting urges." He laughed self-consciously and said, "Does that sound depraved to you?" Linda shook her head. "It doesn't sound depraved, it simply sounds like you're making the most of your dark gift." He beckoned her with a finger. "Want to help me make the most of my dark gift?" Linda shook her head. "I'd love to help," she admitted, "but I need to go out before sunrise and recruit a new member for our mini coven." A flash of annoyance furrowed his brow. "Already? Can't we go one night without having a third member in our group?" Fixing her with an accusatory glower, he added, "And are you going to fuck this one too?" She brushed up against him and laughed. "Of course I am," she said. "If I don't do something to piss you off, we won't have any reason to kiss and make up now, will we?" Her fingers brushed against the swell of his thickening erection as she whispered, "And we both know how much fun it is when we have the chance to kiss and make up."